the genesis behind Injective, and has it stayed the same?
Yeah, I would say like the abstract idea has roughly stayed the same.
Providing access at the moment, particularly in RWA, it's been a very limited target market, right? How many accredited investors can participate in these RWA?
That does bring up like a very interesting point. I feel like the advantage for Injective's case is that there's a
Limitless markets, right, where people can trade in new types of financial instruments.
yeah, I've had a lot of thoughts on how to solve that.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Super excited to be here, Truflation Nation, and super excited to be here with Eric from Injective. And as all of you have known, there's a nice big partnership that we've just announced. We've integrated Truflation into the Injective blockchain, and we're now live on there. And hopefully, we're going to be building out some interesting new things that we may be talking about today. But maybe before I go into too much, Eric, nice to have you on here, and thanks for joining. And yeah, maybe just share a bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into crypto. Would love to hear that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Hey guys, this is Eric Chen, co-founder and CEO of Injective Labs. So your question was how I got into crypto. I would say like it initially started when I was probably in like a summer camp or something in high school, and for some reason, I think we just happened to like run into a bunch of like ETH people back in the day. I think a lot of them are like consensus people pretty quickly afterwards, and they just keep talking about like blockchain, and obviously I didn't know what blockchain was, and they told me it's like, oh, it's the same type of mechanism that powers Bitcoin, and I was like, well, yeah, like I remember Bitcoin when I was like doing stuff around the dark web. um, and then yeah, like I wasn't like immediately interested for sure, but like afterwards, started seeing and hearing, more and more people around me. And luckily, I grew up in the Bay Area, so it's pretty close to a lot of the tech people. And just hearing about it more and more started off as like a niche community, and I decided to spend some time to like dive into it, and honestly got kind of my mind blown the first time I like read about it, understood the mechanism, um, and then flash forward to like college. That kind of became like the backdrop, and I just saw a lot of opportunity to like get more involved in the space. Also like pay for like food and drinks with mining in the dorm room. But more importantly, went into like the CS track and did a lot more research for me to join full time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I just the story, right? How you got in young, you had the opportunity, you learned, and you were exposed to it, and I think that's really the brilliance around Bitcoin and crypto and Ethereum and all the other layers that have now sort of grown from a $0 backed industry to now all of a sudden being a 1.5 trillion or 1.6 trillion dollar industry. And so having the opportunity back at high school, I mean, so early, I mean, that's pretty amazing, no?
Yeah, and basically, I initially was working on like some of the kind of like fundamental research aspects of what eventually became part of Injective. And back then, like my co-founder Albert also happened to be in New York with me because we were both in college and it's both interim season basically, and he got very interested in it, and we decided to work on it like full time together.
And then what triggered you to go down the route of Injective? What was sort of the genesis behind Injective, and has it stayed the same?
Yeah, I would say like the abstract idea has roughly stayed the same. Initially, obviously, for this industry, for like one of very kind of like initial fascination was being able to transact, being able to perform a lot of these activities, and these days all of the activities in a fully decentralized and trustless way, where like for the longest time people think that things on the internet you lose sovereignty. It's easily replicated, it's easily copied, there is no a uniqueness to it. And then for this space, it creates this kind of new, almost like a new paradigm where it adds like uniqueness and identity to a lot of things, and basically ascribe like value to you know internet tokens, basically. Um, the irony back then, and it's certainly still the case today, is that um, you interact with you know basically like all these blockchains, or uh, create the financial transactions, create like any type of trading activity. The majority of it is done through centralized venues. And back then we were realizing that this certainly shouldn't be the case in the long run. It's kind of like an antithesis to what the space is about. So there definitely needs to be kind of like a at least like a duopoly between like a decentralized and like a centralized trading venue where it takes over at least like 50% of market share in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen that evolution, right? It started off very centralized, and it has now sort of morphed into a much more decentralized world where you can now actually exchange on a decentralized world with actually pretty good user experiences. I think one of the things has always been liquidity has been a problem. How have you addressed that?
Yeah, so you can really separate liquidity into like, three different stages. First of all, it's like really the bootstrapping phase, which is the 0 to 1. As a new platform, when Injective first launched, you'd have to identify and collaborate with a lot of these early adopter market makers that have been integrating and testing during both the testnet and also the Canary chain phase. So this way, for the canonical chain launch, all the kinks are sorted out, all the issues are sorted out. But more importantly, there's an immense amount of Genesis liquidity for the users to enjoy. And obviously, the downside for a lot of these market makers is that it's capped in scale. It's very difficult for like a platform to go down this approach continuously until like and basically outcompete against a lot of the primary venues. You'll always be like a order of magnitude away from like the liquidity level of like these large venues like Binance, and that's why it also is equally important to create this flywheel where essentially there's takers and general traders, or algorithmic traders that are creating these like market impact to the market makers, and create this full cycle. But above that, it's also about creating like a program to encourage both centralized or decentralized, or a mixture of both traders and prop firms to be able to provide liquidity on board to the platform, because the goal is not to using incentivization to bring out the most liquidity to the platform, but to bring out enough liquidity to uh, um, kind of incentivize them to get over the integration ramp. And the final phase, and this is what we've been focusing on, is to build up this synergizing ecosystem of application, of protocols, of primitive. Because one of the most you know I would say like amazing thing about the injective on-chain mechanism with regards to the exchange module is that it's one of the chain native type of module and transactions where the cost is very very low, and developers can easily plug and play, build their own Cosmosm smart contract, or even build their own like off-chain mechanism utilizing a combination of other modules. And by that, it's a very, very easy venue for them to access liquidity, but it's also a very, very easy venue to kind of prevent any sort of fragmentation issue, to allow for more and more liquidity competition, and to kind of exponentially expand these product offerings where end users get to enjoy as an exchange user, as a DeFi user, to a point where let's say like Injective in like 5 years versus like a centralized exchange like OKEX, like etc. What users are going to find on Injective is just kind of this a plethora of applications going on Helix to get to see. It's like hey, like I get to do grid bots, I get to do all these like automated strategies, and I get to subscribe to vaults, and I see these hundreds and hundreds of vaults, and I get to like like a copy trade, etc. And then, like week after week, there's, new things being added to lists. It's just being iterated and iterated. Unlike, like a centralized exchange where, it'll probably take months and months for them to have a disruptive new feature. And for Injective's case, the exciting part is that, once you create this incentivization, once you create this, a value flow, um, the growth is exponential because this is an open, permissionless, network.
And I think that's the beauty. I mean, I can attest to how easy it was to integrate. I mean, we integrated Truflation really seamlessly. Your documentation was really well, and it was really plug and play, literally. I mean, it was really, our developers did, I think in a day, we managed to connect Truflation to Injective. And then also the tooling that you have in order to be able to build out a front end was also, with Cosmwasm, I have a larger pool of WebAssembly developers that automatically I can tap into and build out a great front end experience, which I think all those play together and make the injective proposition. But I'm just like you just mentioned earlier, the intriguing element was around liquidity, right? From 0 to 1, I can immediately have access to a pool of liquidity that allows us to get off the ground a lot faster, and any startup to sort of get off the ground a lot quicker. On that note, right? I mean, right now, sort of in the form of liquidity, a lot of the crypto companies, the big narrative right now is cross chain, right? I mean, how to bridge cross chain, and I think you've done some really innovative solutions around virtual machines and being able to bridge across with ultimately additional wallets beyond just the Ninja wallet into the injective ecosystem. Maybe, yeah. How are these innovative developments working, and where are you at with that?
Yeah. So for, cross-chain interoperability and basically ensuring that, interacting in a cross-chain environment is as seamless, as hands-off, and as frictionless as possible. And then that was basically one of the biggest issue when the early days of like Injective Labs. We were first, exploring like the application as like an L2 angle, and then like decided to go with like a chain angle because we realized that that was the most kind of like future proof and the most decentralized approach. But one of the immediate issue that comes with it is losing out on the access to asset, losing out on the composability, losing out on being able to have like a smooth experience for users to onboard, and thereby like one of the uh, um, like one of the most I would say like biggest resource allocation when we were building up the first version or like the canary version of Injective Chain. The majority of time was actually spent on the internal bridge, which is like the Injective bridge module, and that allows for any type of arbitrary ERC20 token to be bridged to Injective. That allows for vice versa, and also user being able to very seamlessly within a matter of minutes to see their asset being like deposited. It's almost as if they're making like an on-chain transaction on Ethereum and they never left Ethereum. And there were a lot of work to like remove the need for like injective token as gas within a chain to allow applications to pay on behalf of users. And I think these days MetaMask has certainly added a lot of functionalities to enable that, but for a lot of users on top of Injective, you didn't even switch network. You don't even need to, like a switch from like Ethereum network to, a new RPC. Like all the transactions that you make using your MetaMask wallet is via like connection to the Ethereum network and relayed. And this basically, creates a very interesting user experience where you can completely abstract Injective away. And then, of course, like this is only like the Ethereum chain. And over time, we've expanded a lot more with integration with other bridge partners, with a lot of, like other interoperability solutions, etc. Which again, it's always about user experience first. To integrate with Wormhole to bring over like Solana users, to integrate with as many wallet solutions as possible to natively interact. So I think pretty much at this point we're compatible with almost all the wallet solutions out there. Because like even for Phantom, which added like Ethereum support, and then like literally like a day or two ago, like Ledger support came live. So at this point, it pretty much covers like all the all solutions.
Yeah. And then where are you sort of where do you view sort of the next sort of, let's say, year or 2 years from for an Injective? Where do you want to spend your time, and how do you want to, what sort of areas do you want to focus on?
So recently there's been like, for the past few months, and looking forward, to the new year, there's been mainly, like two verticals or like, initiatives that we've been spending a lot of time on. I think, first of all, like uh in terms of net new things, it's the launch of all these electro chains, and this is basically all these rollup environments, which are INEVM, INSVM, to allow a lot of these developers to immediately deploy their contract, to immediately become interoperable with the Injective ecosystem, and essentially it's a starting point for these developers to onboard to like the Injective native modules, etc. And on another hand, I think in like an off-chain way, there's been like a very very major push around promoting and creating all these frameworks and standards and integrations for real world asset. And I think most people probably notice like one of the biggest part about the Volan chain upgrade for Injective is including this native permissioned token module. And one interesting property of this is that these tokens are pretty much treated the same by any other applications or dApp or modules as like an arbitrary bank token, but it it's also built in with like the permission property, which allows for like a whitelist, which allows for like a blacklist, etc. And this basically creates this entire like ecosystem where these tokens, because they're not like a full on like permission token, they can out of the box be compatible and easily integratable for any of the existing protocol. But on this at the same time, it's able to like satisfy any type of compliance standards and any type of like frameworks. And with that, obviously comes with a much bigger institutional push with onboarding. And before we've worked with Ondo, etc., on bring over USDY, but also a lot of exciting like collaboration with Truflation to bring it to the next level. And this is all going to come into fruition after a Volan upgrade.
Yeah, no, we're super excited about that, right? We've launched on Arbitrum, we launched our Nuon protocol, which is basically a flat coin. Basically, it's a synthetic asset pegged to the cost of living, so to Truflation. As and so what we're trying to do is, at the moment, all the smart contracts are sitting over there. How can we migrate those easily across to Injective? Number one, the token contract's a bit easier, and then bridging that onto Injective, and then having that available in an exchange as a perpetual so that people can bet futures on it. That's super interesting, and that's a slightly easier task. But actually bringing the minting contracts across onto, and the collateral contracts all across onto Injective is something, if we can simplify that and streamline that, that'd be super exciting for the dev team, and also for the prospects of bringing more flat coins to the Injective layers.
We're actually, recently, been like pushing out this experimental feature, which basically allows anyone to, generate like a new token, a new, a denom on top of Injective in like a, pretty plain bank token way. But unfortunately, because the Injective core chain is CosmWasm based, so it means that it's not very easily portable from existing Solidity contract to Injective main chain. But this also means, and this is also why the Electron chains are like so important, because they allow for the porting of that and to have native interoperability with that.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm super keen to explore that and see what we can do around that, right? The other thing is I mean, like you, I mean, we're very bullish on the RWA narrative, and building out. Not only are we keen on the narrative itself, we've actually built and foresaw that this is going to come at some point. We track 18 million items. We bring those with 3 different price feeds on chain. and they range from commodities, real estate, and precious metals, energy, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that we're very keen on is building out, you know, um, indexes so that you can trade the underlying derivatives. But on that note, one that you mentioned earlier, permissioned tokens, right? I mean, that's a big thing at the moment. You're seeing in the RWA, um, a lot of different permissioned tokens, right? How do I tokenize S&P 500? How do I tokenize USDT bills, and things like that? And those all need to be permissioned, right? And how do you go about the permissioned element? Is that the user's been KYC'd, or how does that play into Injective, and where does that permissioned element come in?
Yeah, so on-chain part is, of course, creating this standard that's easily, integratable by all the, compliance solutions, all the KYC providers, et cetera. But more importantly, on the on-chain layer, it's about building out this permission token aspect where it can easily compose with any other, protocols, any other standard, where, it doesn't create kind of like a stuck fund issue, or it doesn't create, incompatibility issues. With, let's say, like what happens if you have like a permission token on Ethereum and you're trying to integrate it into like Uniswap, etc. Um, the interesting part here is that there's been a lot of ongoing push on the permissionless side and also on the permission side to bring on a lot of these real world assets, real world tokens to basically kind of globalize a lot of these access. So like one of the issue with like U.S. participants, um, and like the reason why like real world asset hasn't been the hottest thing out there until very recently, is that the U.S. Individuals can pretty much access anything, especially if you're accredited. But this is certainly not the case for like a lot of places outside of U.S., or a lot of places that's like not close to the United States. And this actually brings out a lot of demand, especially signaled by, for example, Ondo, for example, the traction with Truflation, to kind of gain exposure as this non-US entity, and not having to go through like dozens and dozens of middlemen, service providers, like banking solutions to even gain access to these type of instruments. And so it really kind of like truly from a fundamental level, like lower the barrier to entry and lowered like the kind of like access cost for a lot of these things.
Yeah. I mean, that's really why I'm super excited, right? Just really providing access at the moment, particularly in RWA. It's been a very limited target market, right? How many accredited investors can participate in these RWAs, right? Maybe in investment vehicles that are out that are sort of translate from RWA, right? It's very few. Given that the world's population is like 9 billion or something, you've got maybe 1.5 billion that are possibly, sort of accredited investors per se. Then all of a sudden that leaves you with a whole 8 billion people, or maybe 7 billion people that don't have access to these. And all of a sudden you're opening up that window for them to participate in something, either in its synthetic form or in its sort of collateralized, authentic, sort of backed asset. And so that's, to me, really exciting, and that's why I think, yeah, what we're doing together it really jazzes me up as well, especially, sort of, yeah. Um, that's I think RWA. A lot of people are nervous about the RWA and growing, yeah, in that space. Ultimately, because of the regulatory framework. But if you've got permission solutions there, and then the liquidity element, right? There's always challenges in terms of liquidity on the ability. So if I use a a permissioned token in my collateral pool and it needs to get liquidated on that event, is how can I immediately transfer that and find liquidity pools to redeem on that liquidated asset if it's only for a very limited circle of users. And I think, yeah, have you had any thoughts around how to solve that from a technical perspective?
Yeah, I've had a lot of thoughts on how to solve that, because this is like the biggest gating barrier, right? What ends up happening within this space is that any type of permission asset, any type of issuance, any type of tokenized representation of a real world asset, it ends up being kind of like an intra-platform thing where your counterparty is always going to be, those who happen to onboard to this platform. And the reason for that is quite simple. It's a concentration of risk where, if you subscribe to a certain permission list or like a KYC, a service provider, there's a chance that, the framework that the KYC provider established does not align with what you establish or what satisfies as your customer base. And one thing that we've been thinking a lot about is trying to create this kind of like ground up shared list where people can opt in, people can subscribe, people can uh, increase or remove based on certain properties. It could be like a list provided by a certain KYC solution, and that's KYC solution can have multiple lists, accredited, non-accredited. Some of them could overlap, some of them doesn't have to be overlapped, and by having all these lists completely public and also established, it allows for new issuance to be extremely easy, and more importantly, it allows for kind of like this kind of like integrate once and then you're set for this entire ecosystem of applications and ecosystem of products. And that requires a lot of very very aggressive onboarding and collaboration with KYC providers, with different types of custodians. And recently, we've been doing a lot of work on that because we we've done a lot of work to obviously onboard like institutional market makers, to onboard liquidity providers, etc. But one of the biggest issues is that oftentimes the issue of liquidity is not from the lack of participants, but rather it's from the lack of access for users to provide liquidity at like a reasonable cost. You'd have to onboard to a platform. You have to wait decades for them to get back to you on whether your KYC has passed, or you have to supply document for like 500 back and forth. But if you do it once and then you're able to like access a range of products because it's all enforced on chain, that actually creates a completely new user experience.
Yeah, I mean, so just maybe for background for everybody that's listening, right? There are a number of providers out there that do KYC, and then they provide that you have to go the back and forth, but you do it once, and they whitelist your addresses accordingly. And then basically, what my interpretation, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, is that basically you take those lists and you provide attestation that these are all whitelisted wallet addresses with users that have KYC from these and these and these providers. And then you can now interswap and interchange any permissioned asset with any of these users because they've all been whitelisted.
Exactly.
In simple
And
terms, right?
it basically became like an a la carte for like, let's say you're an issuer. You
Yeah.
can pick and choose from like all these providers, or who
Yeah.
knows, someone might make like a contract to be like, hey, here are all the okay trustworthy accredited investors, and then you subscribe to that
Yeah.
list, which is sort of subscribe to like five others and updates.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's meant to create this network where if you subscribe to one, this kind of like aggregator will create this trusted system.
Yeah. And that to me is a huge user experience because it's such a negative experience. Every time you got to go to every single individual bank, you got to go and do it every single time. Whereas now all of a sudden I can go to the Injective chain and I've got all these exchanges up there that are all working with the same sort of core underlying database that in a way that is whitelisted and allows us to then trade with all of these RWA permissioned assets that require a certain step of permissions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And that'll really help. I mean, the way sort of it's done in the past is, sort of we've looked at having that as collateral in Nuon, right? So how do I get a UST, a T bill in as collateral? And it's always been around liquidity problems. Okay, how do we do that? No, we'll create a curve pool and then we'll mix it up with everybody else and create a new token, and then you can leverage that token to then liquidate in the curve pool. Which ultimately, yeah, sure, you can do that, but it just creates other layers and then again, toll takers along the way. And sometimes there's always friction. You need to wait for confirmations, and it doesn't happen as seamlessly, which I think you've come up with a really nice solution, and makes
Actually,
Injective extremely, yeah.
that does bring up like a very very interesting point, is that depending on their compliance framework and requirement, because different types of securitized tokens, different types of like real world asset tokens they might have like different types of restrictions. But one possibility is that on top of Injective, if you include the exchange module address as one of the whitelisted participants, users can obviously do all the trading activity, etc. Um, and the cool part here is that you can do it permissionlessly, but only within the exchange module. So let's say like you need a liquidity provider, etc. You need them to post. Obviously, that liquidity provider would have to be like a KYC'd and whitelisted to be able to deposit, but it doesn't fence anyone to participate in that market. Now, how you continuously satisfy the compliance requirement is actually very interesting. Is that um, basically the user cannot withdraw from the exchange module, right? Because they're not on the whitelist, and this basically allows for like exchange module to have these balances of tokens where for a certain subset of these RWA tokens, it's acceptable and within their compliance framework, and that's basically allows for a much more liquid and much more composable kind of like a transaction process, but at the same time not sacrificing the compliance framework, because these guys they're only getting like a credit on top of like this module address rather than actually holding custody of the token.
Yeah, interesting. So given that, right? So where do you see your ecosystem growing, and how do you want to grow the ecosystem for builders to come onto Injective?
Yeah, honestly, it's a lot of like developer education, approaching everyone. You know, the I feel like the advantage for Injective's case is that there's a very very clear utilitarian kind of advantage over like a generic environment, because there's always going to be a faster, there's always going to be like a cheaper like a chain or L2 environment. But for Injective's case, it's about having these modules, having these you know um, uh, out of the box, plug and play, composable, and very easily synergizable like components that you can just avoid writing all those contracts, which are like arguably some of the most important and secured like high security discipline, and basically build like the application as if you're just doing like building blocks on top of each other in like a very very like capital efficient and cost efficient way.
Yeah, no, I mean, so do you have plans for doing like hackathons, and sort of, are you going to have a big sort of Injective summit sort of some things? Are those sort of on the cards for you, or not yet right now? I mean, you've got too much in building going. And so for the moment, you're just focusing on targeted specific market makers, developers, and dApps and wallets. And wallets, you've already got most of them already integrated. Is that sort of
No,
where do
Injective
you see the
actually
next?
has a global virtual hackathon, like
Oh,
that was launched very, very recently. I
oh,
think it's like a month or two ago. And yeah, like it's going to be a continue, like initiative. There's going to be more and more hackathons coming out.
yeah,
And I think this is the best way to get people started. Like,
yeah.
it doesn't matter whether you're like a extremely senior engineer at a big tech, or maybe even VP of engineering at Google or something like that, all the way down to like just someone very very new, fresh out of high school. But there's one place that they will more likely than not meet, and that would be hackathon. And that's actually
Yeah,
how I got into
yeah,
like the space, right? And yeah, like that's going to be like arguably the most important initiative for like bringing on new developers for us. And then yeah, like other than that, it's really about like continuously building, continuously educating and working with developers to to make sure like they have the most seamless possible integration and deployment, and using those learning to kind of improve upon like the core chain, improve upon the modules, and having this truly like a user driven, developer driven like infrastructure.
protocol. Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I mean, we're super excited to be working with you, and yeah, and the team at Injective. Very, I can only sing praises. I mean, yeah, strong execution skills, very deep mind. So yeah, really looking forward to building out and working together more in the future, and then making these RWAs actually really come to life, and building out new types of financial limitless markets, right, where people can trade in new types of financial instruments. I mean, they're same instruments, but maybe same products, but actually on new system changed, innovative systems, right? And I think that's really the exciting thing. And really, yeah, thank you for your time, and really thank you for sharing some of the insights of what you're working on at Injective. And everybody, where can people follow you, and where should they go read up about documentation, and yeah, how can they follow you and your thoughts, and as you continue down this path?
Yeah, I think the easiest place to start is injective.com. That's
Yeah,
kind of like, the starting place for like learning anything about Injective. I think, other than that, follow like Injective Twitter, which is at Injective underscored. Now, of course, you can keep up with our work at Injective Labs. And also for my Twitter, I think it's Eric at Eric Injective.
cool. No, thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the insights, and everybody follow those addresses, and yeah, stay in touch and build on Injective, and follow for this new announcement coming out. You just announced Volon, right? Or is that the new
Yeah.
announcement that's coming? Yeah.
Yeah, that is a major chain upgrade that we did that
Yeah.
kind of introduced like this whole I would say like primitive and platform for countless kind of permission tokens for RWAs and for kind of for the first time for institutions to issue and collaborate on.
Yeah, and look forward to collaborating with you on that and with the other institutions as well. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for your time.